My name's Rashawn, and this is my midterm presentation. So, in this midterm presentation, I created a battleship game using C++ and object-oriented programming. So, I used classes. So, I'm gonna go ahead and run the program. Let's see how it works. So, first thing the program does is it prompts a menu. It says, ask me to please enter N to create a new game, or P to load the previous game, or E to exit the program. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new game. So I'm gonna enter N, and it does has to be a negative, and it can be a capital N or a comma N. Enter N. I'm gonna ask me to enter the name of the first player ship. I'm going to say Rem. Of the second player ship, say Zeus, and then the number of ships. Now, the maximum amount of ships I enabled the user or each player to have was 10. So if I were to try to enter 11, the program should validate this input and prompt me to enter a different size or a different number of ships. And there it goes, it's in the loop, and it prompts me to enter a different number of ships. So since this is just for programming or debugging or just presentation purposes, I'm only going to use 2 positions. I'm gonna enter 2. Then just for presentation reasons, I'm I'm printing out each coordinate for the ships. So the first coordinate should be at row 7, column 4. So there we have it right here. And then the second one should be at row 2, column 0, right here. And for player 2, it should be at row 6 in column 2 and 9, row 9 in column 1. Then we're printing out the size of the ships, which is equal to the initial hit points, and it prompts me to enter a coordinate to attack player 2 because the game starts off with player 1 as the current player. And then if I want to save the game, I can enter a -1 for any coordinate. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try to hit and attack player 2. Then I'm going to use player 2 to attack player 1 to see how the program works. So what should happen, the program should, I'm going to enter a correct coordinate to attack player 2. I'm going to go ahead and attack position or coordinate 6 and 2. And what the program should do, it should print another set of boards for player 1 and player 2. It should replace this coordinate with an X, and it should decrement Zeus ships to 1, and it should also print Rem ships as 2 still. And then it should prompt me to attack player 1. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter to demonstrate this. So first thing we want to check, we're going to check the player 2 board, and there we have X. Then we get a statement saying that the ship was destroyed. We're printing out the player's points, the hit points. Rem still has his ships, and Zeus was deducted. Then the program promised me to enter coordinates to attack player 1. But I want to see if I want to prove that this is validated, the input is validated. So I'm going to try enter a coordinate above 10, which shouldn't be possible or above 9, which shouldn't be possible because the rows go from 0 to 9 and the columns go from, the rows go from 0 to 9 and the column goes from 0 to 9. So a coordinate of 10 should give me an error. So I'm going to say 10, 10, and there. I'm using an exception class to print this error. An exception class with a while loop. So I'm going to attack player 1 now. I'm say 2-0. And what should happen again? I should see both players' boards. Then I should see this coordinate replaced with an X. And then it should say ship destroyed, Rem ships 1, Zeus ships 1. Then it should prompt me to attack Zeus player 2. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have the X, says ships destroyed, and both points are equal to 1. Now, before I try to win the game with Zeus, I'm going to try ahead and attack a coordinate that has 0, or not 0 but O. So I empty ship or water. So to do that, I'm gonna just say 0, 0, and to the 2 players board prints again with the card with the destroyed ships and the other ship, and it prints that coordinate is not a ship coordinate. It prints the same hit points, and it prompts me to enter. It switches the player's turn, and then it asks me to attack player 1's ship. But I want to save the game, and to save the game, I can enter -1 for any coordinates. I can enter -1 and 9, and what I should see the file name, and I should be saved, and then the program should exit with a code 0. So there you have it. The game was saved. Now I'm gonna go ahead and check that in my files, and there we have it. Now we need to check the console along with the file that was saved to make sure the coordinates was correct. So the first coordinates that I attacked was 2 and 0 for player 1 and 6 and 2 for player 2. So right here we have both boards connected together, but you can see right here that X is still there and X is still there. We have the hit points right here, 1 for player 1 and 1 for player 2, the name of the players and the player's turn. So this means since the player's turn is 2, when I load the game, I should be attacking player 1's board. So now, since we validated that the information was saved correctly, I'm gonna go ahead and run the program again, and this time I'm gonna enter P to load this file right here, and we're gonna look through this file as we load it to make sure the data is correct. So P, enter. So there we display both boards that's in the same state, correct name, and the hit points, and it's prompting me to attack player 1 because the current player is player 2 and the data is the same. Now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna try to attack a destroyed ship already. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to attack this ship right here that is already destroyed to see what the program does. To see how it reacts. Now what should happen is it should loop over and ignore that coordinate because that ship is it should print that the ship is already destroyed. So I'm gonna say we're attacking player 1, so 2 and 0. There we have it. Coordinate 2-0. The ship is already destroyed. Now player 1 can attack player 2 right now, so we're gonna finish the game, and what should happen, the game should print the winner, say that the game is over, and then delete the file since this game is already completed. We don't want to keep it saved. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that for player 2. The coordinate is 9-1. And there you have it. It says the ship was destroyed. It prints the points. So Rem was the winner, and the game is over, and it deleted the file. And as we can see, the file is no longer in the IDE. No. What I want to talk about as one of the interesting or more challenging parts of this program for me was the was loading the game state from the file. So at first I was using too many loops, and I was getting a memory code of, I think it was 139. So I know that basically I'm out of bounds basically, or the grid wasn't initialized. I had both of those errors, and I had to figure them out all by myself because I only got a code of 139. So the error where the grid wasn't initialized was when I was invoking the function right here in this load game function from main function CVP. So at first I just tried calling the game that I created the game. At first I had the start game function right here, which would initialize the board, but I moved that into the game constructor so I don't have to write it out right here. So at first I had that, then I was calling the game that load, but I was getting that memory error because the grid has not been initialized, so I can't assign those values to it, basically. So after initializing the grid, I was able to load the file to it. And then my game.cbp and the load game function of the game object, I had a loop right here. I was using one loop, and I had another loop. What did I have the loop? It was set board, and I had another loop right here. And I was trying to access the grid. I was trying to assign a row to the grid like this, but this subscript right here represents a character and not a line. If it was just grid and I, then it would be the line or the vector inside of the 2D vector. But that's where I was going wrong. And those were the more challenging parts of the program. Now I'm just gonna go run over through the classes and the ships. So in my header files, I'm just printing my not printing but declaring my function prototypes and my variables, my private variables. So for the ship class, I have a name, a string to hold the name of each ship, the size of the ship, and I have a 2D well, not a 2D but a vector that takes, and I had to get used to vectors with pairs. I had to learn that on the go. And then I have a hit points variable to store the points and to deduct from when the user successfully attacked the other user's board. The board object. Now, where I had problems with this was I forgot that I needed two boards. So in my game class, I was only, let me go to the game.cpp. I was trying to call the game that, for instance, like the game.set board or a game.set board player 2, but I had to remember that the game consists of two players, so I had to have two board objects, player 1 for player 1, so I can access all of these functions to initialize the board, to place the ships, so to place the coordinates of the ships like S, to place them randomly on the board, to set the result string. The result string is if the ship was destroyed, if the attack hit water, or if you attack on a ship that is already destroyed. The set board that sets the board when you're loading from a file. That's the only time this function is invoked. The receive attack that passes the coordinates of x and y to the function to see if it equals to check the grid to see if it's equal to s. If so, then replace that coordinate with x to show that the ship was destroyed. And the display board function, which displays each player's board. Well, not display each player, but it displays the grid. I'm displaying each player's board in the grid, not in the grid, but the game.cpp. Or down here. Where is it? In the show boards right here. This is the function that I'm calling to display each player's board, and this is the function right here that I was just talking about. Then this is where most of where everything really comes together, where all the objects are used, and then we're finish off in the main right here. So the first thing for the new game function, this was the function that created the new game. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm declaring 3 variables, 2 of string to hold the ship name, the first player's ship name, the second player's ship name, then the size of the ship. And I'm passing all of these to the ship details function by reference. Now if we go down to the ship details function, we have all these parameters passed by reference. And the first thing I have at the top of this function is the cin.ignore. The reason why I'm calling this function, because in my main I had a cin object, and the c, not the cin object, but the cin, this statement right here, after the user enters n, there is an new line character that is placed at the end of the buffer. So the cin.ignore ignores that and then allows the user to print a string with space. So I could have entered a name, my first and last name, if I wanted to. Then I'm prompting the user to enter the name of the first ship, enter the name of the second ship, enter the size of the ship, and then I'm validating the size to ensure that the size is not greater than 10 or less than 0, because these are the only the positions, because we're using a 10 by 10 grid or a 10 by 10 board. So the only positions for rows and columns are 0 through 9. And then the loops over until the user enter a valid number of ships. Then let's go back up here. That's where I left off in the new game function. Then we created 2 vectors of pair to hold the ship coordinates, and we're using the randomized ships function, and we're passing these vectors as reference arguments. And what this function does is it takes the vector, and for each coordinate, because one element has 2 values, and I'm accessing it with the for each loop. So for each coordinate, which is 2 values, for the card at first, I'm assigning a random number from 0 to 9, and from the card at second, I'm assigning a random number from 0 to 9. So this is how I randomized the ships on the board. And then this is where I'm printing out the coordinates in a new game, just for presentation reasons, so I could validate where the ships were. Then let's move on. I created two ship objects with the name and the size, and it calls the constructor right here that initialize the name, the size, and the hit points. Now the hit points is the same as the size, so I didn't need to pass the points we didn't need to take the points as a parameter or argument. And then we're calling the board because the board class, because we need 2 players. And we're passing these arguments too because the board class is derived from the ship class, so we have to call that constructor also. Then finally we're calling the game class, and this class is where the gameplay is basically going to happen. So we're starting the game. Let's go ahead and see what the start game function does at the top. So this does initialize the board, and by how we're initializing the board is we're using an inner loop. Where is it? Right, we're using 2 loops, one inside, a loop inside of another. And since it's a 10 by 10 grid, for the first 10 lines, we're creating a row, or reserving 10 spaces in that vector, rather. Then we're assigning 0 to each value in the row, and then we're pushing it back to the grid. And for 10 lines in the grid, we're pushing back 10 zeros, and well, we had a 10 by 10. That's how we initialize a 10 by 10 grid. Let's go back to the main functions. Then we're calling the play ship function from the game, that's CVP, or the game class. Go ahead and see what that does. So remember, we already randomized the function, not the function, but randomizes these ships right here with the randomized ships function right here. And then we pass them. I don't know if I jumped over this, but I think I jumped over this. So the ship, that play ship, just assigned the coordinates to the parameters coordinates to the coordinates variable, or coordinates vector of the ship class right here. Then now we're passing player 1 and player 2 ship right here, and now we can move to this function, game that player ship. Where is it? Right. Oh, that's in the board, I'm sorry. Right, and then we're using another for each loop. So for each coordinate, which again has 2 values, 2 integer values representing x and y, the coordinates, we're gonna assign s to it based on the coordinates that we randomize. And then we're gonna add that to the grid. We're pushing back the ships. Then while checking, game that checking is equal to false. Go ahead and check that function and see what it does. Basically, it just checks if there's a winner. So it should be equal to false. So if player 2 is sunk, or player 1 is sunk, then we're gonna show the boards to show who won on the boards, to show who have all the X's and who doesn't. Show the points to show who has 0 points, who still has points, and then print the name of the player, and that the game is over, and we're gonna return true. We're doing the same thing for player 1. Then we're calling user input for a game, and what this function basically does down here is just simulating the gameplay. So it's inside the loop, so until there's a winner, this function will keep running and running, and it will prompt the user to enter coordinates, or a -1 for a coordinate, to save the game and to attack each player. And right here we're using a try and catch block, because we're trying to catch errors, exceptions from our game class. Right here we have a an exception class, and let's find where we're throwing that exception. I think it's in the get win function. Right here. So if x is greater than 10, because remember a coordinate cannot have a position that is 10 or equal to 10. So if x or y is greater than or equal to 10, we're going to throw our exception. Or if x is less than 0 and y is less than 0, and also throw this exception. Now what the exception does, it tries it in the game the attack function. So if it throws an exception, it goes into the catch block, and while x is greater than or equal to 10, or y is greater than or equal to 10, or x is less than -1, or y is less than or equal to -1, I think that's an error, that should be -1, then we're going to print invalid coordinate enter, and we're going to prompt them to try again and enter 2 different coordinates. Then outside of the while loop, we're going to call the game that attack. Then we'll switch player at the end of this function. Then print winner. Now this function is overloaded, and it's overloaded because this function tells if there's a winner in a new game. So the overloaded function, it takes a file name so it can delete the file, because we're using it in the load function to delete the file that we load the game from, because we don't want to keep that file there when another user plays the game and tries to load from a file. That would be the wrong game state. So we want to, if they try to load from a file that a game is already complete, we want to delete that file. But right here, it just takes the game object or the game instance. Let's go ahead and see what that does. So I'm going to do this one, and it just check if there's a winner. If there's a winner, we're exiting the function, by exiting the whole program. Then we're doing it all over again, because if player 1 wins, we won't check the win until this function runs again. So this is why I'm calling the print win function right here. Then we're closing the file because we checked if it was open. Now, oh, that's the load function, I'm sorry. Yeah, basically, so after that while loop, then we finish the program right there. Then we go into our finish the function right there. Then we go into our load game function. Check if the file is open after it creates the file object. Then if it's open, we're creating 2 players again, calling the game function, and talked about the constructor initializing the game. Then we have a load file up here as a const. Now the reason why this is not a const, because in my delete file function in game, my delete file function, where is it? Right here, I'm making some changes to the string. So this is why I couldn't have it as a consonant right there. So I just left it as a global variable. So that's the only place I'm changing, and that's the reason why I don't have it as a const at the top. So basically, so after creating 2 players, player 1 and player 2, we're passing those players to the game. Then we're loading the file, and then basically if get current player is equal to 1, then we want to run the function in this format. Actually, I can't recall why I have it as player one, because the class should already checked that. I should have a function that already checked that, and basically it does the same thing that a new game function does, and that's it. And if there was not a file found, the file doesn't open, then we're going to print out there's no game state stored in memory. And that's basically it.